Brett Snodgrass here, Iron Deep Podcast. Today we have Dennis Allen. Dennis is a 6-time turnaround CEO, helping Wall Street backed companies in trouble get back on track. But today we're really going to be talking about his book called The Disciple Dilemma, because something is weird. Christ followers are experiencing struggles and symptoms across the country. Christians are walking out on their faith. There's nuns, duns, deconverted, and ex-evangelicals. Why are so many who still claim Christianity acting as if they're on mute or inert or just not willing to talk about Christ outside their church walls? What's going on? This is Brett Snodgrass with another episode of the Iron Deep Podcast. I got Dennis Allen on the episode with me today. What's going on, Dennis?
Hey, Brett, thanks for having me. Life's going on, and life's going just exactly like Christ said it would.
Amen, man. Yeah, different seasons, different things, different challenges, and we're all trying to have that singular purpose and following the Lord here. And today's show is really going to be about that. Dennis, you've written a book called The Disciple Dilemma, which is very interesting. Really interested to talk about that. You've been a marketplace leader, been a businessman throughout your life, and today we're going to dive into really what is true discipleship. What is this dilemma, and why are we even talking about it, right? There are a lot of churches in Western culture, but you're saying we have this dilemma. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, true discipleship. And I just want to dive into your book here. And it starts off with this, in a disciple dilemma. You just start talking about something isn't right. I'm just going to start there. Something isn't right. Can you start talking about that, Dennis?
Yeah, so the line that I use with people to try to get the conversation going often is, we've been hacked. There's a software virus loose in the system of discipleship in the Christian world, and it's such a good virus that we don't even notice that it's operating around us. It's shutting down our ability to communicate as followers of Christ. It's shutting down our interest in communicating as followers of Christ. It's shutting down our willingness as followers of Christ. And it all looks good and right and normal, because for 1,800 years, this virus has been percolating around us. We've been trained by people who were trained in the hack. We've been living around operations that say it's just in the hack. And so I guess the closing statement, just before we kick this into some other gears, is there's an idea in the business world a long time ago that said, if we look to the church, those people know how to handle people. Those people know how to get people motivated. Let's go do what they do. Well, what they were looking at was the hacked version of Christianity, which we can talk about. However, it wasn't much later than that the church community said, those business guys have got this figured out. If we just go watch the business guys, they'll know what to do. So we've got this do loop in the virus that's hacking discipleship. So to say it another way, slightly, is that leadership is responsible for dealing with followership. And so leadership, in this case, has to rescue followership from the traditional institutional ship that's destroying discipleship. How's that for a bunch of ships?
That is a lot of ships. You know, that is a lot. As it is a mouthful. Leadership needs to rescue followership and rescue them from this institutionship. So you're saying that the church has been hacked, and there's a problem. You talk about there's ex-evangelicals, there's nuns. Let's just talk about this group for example. Ex-evangelicals, nuns, duns, deconverted, dechurched. People are leaving. Number one, let's just start there. So what's kind of the problem there? People are leaving the church. People are not interested in faith, and people that were interested in faith are not interested anymore.
Yeah, that's well put. There's a very recent book that came out that validated some of the same statistics that you'd read in our book, The Disciple Dilemma. But the new book that's out is called The Great Dechurching. It's by Jim Davis, Michael Graham, and Ryan Burge. And the statement is 40 million millennials and Gen-Zers have walked off on their faith, walked out on their churches, and walked off on any interest in Christianity. My thesis for us today to consider, and by the way, if anybody hears anything that sounds like it's really offensive to you today, blame it on Brett because he
That's
invited
fine.
me.
That's fine.
But we are absolutely not attacking in any way pastors and churches and believers. This is like Brett and I are on a board visit on your business, and we're just asking provocative questions and suggesting some provocative thoughts. So, with that in mind, why have 40 million people walked away? I think a very straightforward, simple, but not simplistic answer is we don't know how to do discipleship. We're doing a partial discipleship. That's where I'd start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you think about the idea of the ex-evangelical, the nun, the done, the deconstruct, the deconverts, it's really popular right now in the UK to be debaptized. That's the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in the US, the idea of being an ex-evangelical, I used to be evangelical, now I'm not. I used to be a member of a church or a believer. If I'm just not going to church, I'm not identifying with the church, I call myself a nun generally.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm done with the whole thing in Christianity, I call myself a done. If I'm just tearing down parts of my Christianity, I'm deconstructed. All of those suggest to us that we fundamentally are missing the core mission of Jesus, and it is we don't know how to do discipleship.
Where do you think we lost this at? Is it a recent thing? Obviously, even in my generation, the church, I feel, has changed quite a bit with maybe not how we do church, but just some of the elements and maybe the entertainment and just maybe the seeker-friendly style. The bigger churches becoming bigger, the smaller churches are getting wiped out. But where do we lose this at? I mean, this is the Great Commission. This is what Christ said.
It is exactly what Christ said. And I love the way you set that up. It is that really man is man. We're always going to be sinful, right? But the issue that I'd really like to lay humbly at the feet of your listeners today is we've been sold a partial bill of goods on discipleship, and it started at least 1,800 years ago. Back in around the 3rd century, we started trying to do things for the very best of reasons, perhaps, but with the lousiest of execution. In other words, we said, here's what we think makes sense. I don't think Jesus thought of this. Let's upgrade this whole thing we call discipleship. And that's the beginning of the hack. I would really suggest to your listeners that we are doing some things in discipleship in beautiful, wonderful ways. For example, sermons today, absolutely fabulous. Resources that you have online to become a believer in Christ or to pursue Christ, absolutely phenomenal. The kinds of seminars we have, the kinds of small groups that we have, wonderful, wonderful things. But small groups, I hope this is going to come across as a little provocative. Small groups are not going to get you discipleship. Sermons are not going to get you discipleship, not as Jesus defined it. They are necessary. Mission trips necessary. Ministry necessary. But that's not really a disciple. That's just the symptoms of a disciple.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, sermons, I can go on and hear the most amazing sermons. I can pull up my phone right now, pull up a Bible app, and not have to maybe dig through the Bible, just say, what do I want to read about, or I want to read this topic on fill in the blank. Small group-wise, my wife and I are getting, we're actually getting ready to lead a small group, and we haven't been in a small group in a little while. And I think the question that I kept asking myself is, I just don't want to get into another thing that doesn't build depth. And I think that's what I've been asking myself. Like, I just don't want to do another thing that doesn't build depth with my walk with God or depth with other believers. Is that what you're seeing, that there's not a lot of depth, that we're lacking some depth?
That's a good way to pursue it. I think it's absolutely commendable and wonderful that you're building a small group. We need community. We need these groups of 5s, 10s, 12s, whatevers that are around us, same age, same stage, same part of life, maybe some bandwidth with age. But the point is, we need community. We need it in very small groups where I know your name, you can see me across the circle, and we need it in large groups where I'm in church. However, back to your point, we've truncated, we've amputated, we've hacked out some of the pieces of discipleship. I'd really like to share a couple of ideas about why this is a problem. And for those of you who are business people, and I know, Brett, you've got a lot of business leaders listening to this call, My world, I came from the dark side of private equity. I'm a Wall Street guy, right?
Hmm.
So I'm really part of the dark side. I'm one of the Darth Vader guys. But my universe is centered around the idea that if you don't really understand your mission, you'll get distracted by everything that's not your mission, and you will eventually be in the ditch. You will be living with a partial. I do turnaround work in corporations to rescue companies that are struggling and having problems. And the thing that I see over and over again, it's almost the same script every time I do a turnaround, is they don't know who they really are, but they're pursuing everything that somebody who acts like they know what they're doing should pursue. It'll kill your business. It will kill discipleship if you don't know your mission.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, in the business world, we call it the shiny object syndrome. That we have a lot of opportunities. I have more
I like
opportunities
that.
probably on my plate right now that look really good. Uh, they look really good. But if I do them all and I try to do them all, I'm gonna burn out. And I say to my team, I was like, we have to stay in our lane. Yes, they do that, and that's awesome. But we do this. Talk about again, going back to discipleship, the mission. I think you're getting at that we're losing some of our mission.
We
And
are absolutely losing our mission. So here we go. This is where you're going to start hearing calls for heresy and burn this guy at the stake. But my claim is that the singular mission Christ gave us as individuals is precisely the same mission that he gave every local church and the church. It's the same exact mission. And it's Matthew 28:19. We can argue a lot about all the things that we should be doing if we're on that mission, but we cannot, I think, make a very strong case outside of go, therefore, and make disciples of all. It doesn't say nations, actually. It says ethnos, and what that means is nationalities. Go make disciples of any nationality you come into. It doesn't mean that Brett has to go be a globetrotter, although it may mean that. And it doesn't mean that you stay strictly at home, although it may mean that. It means as you are going, go make disciples. And where this gets really serious for us, I think, in the church, where I think we've completely lost it for the, as you said, shiny objects, is we have decided that certain things are no longer necessary in discipleship. And if I'm just a membership guy in a church, if I have membership, I've got discipleship. And that's not what Christ was telling us. So we could talk shiny objects if you want to run down that trail, or we could talk about the partials that we're perhaps just simply missing out on. What's your pleasure?
let's do the first one. Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Let's go there.
Shiny objects. In the disciple dilemma, we talk about six things. Certainly, we can come up with others, but I think these are the indicative six. I'll list them very briefly in history, and then we can either toss that aside and move on, or try to deep dive something. Number one is optional lordship. I go back to the 3rd century with Eusebius, and the problem is I want Jesus to save me, but this thing about having him be the Lord, surrendered to him, I'm good, don't need that. I'll just take the salvation coupon and move on. That's one, optional lordship. Number two that we talk about, catch and release Christianity, which is I want to get you saved. And as soon as I get you saved, I'll hand you a Bible, get you to be a member of the church, push you aside. I'm going for the next guy who needs to get saved. And we certainly hope you, as a newly orphaned believer in Christ who has just come to Jesus, makes it. Have a nice day. We're off to the next salvation moment. That's catch and release Christianity. Third shiny object. This goes to Constantine in the 4th century, and it's the idea of power. We think that if Christians can simply be socially powerful, we can have justice as the primary weapon that we use, or we can have morality as the primary weapon that we use, or intellectual, theological horsepower as the primary weapon that we use, we can banish all of our foes and everyone will fall subjugated to Christ. That's power. It's not biblical, but that's the way that we use it today. That's a shiny object. Fourth shiny object is a thing called clericalism. That's a big phrase. We took it from Basil in the 4th century, and that basically goes like this. No liturgies without a license. The pros get to go up front and be behind the pulpit. The pros get to bury the in-laws. They get to do the wedding ceremonies and the baptisms. The rest of you sit in the pews, be amazed at the TED Talk and the Coldplay. That's clericalism, telling the pastor, you're completely responsible, and if you don't do it all, it doesn't happen. And everybody in the pews, you're here for concierge Christianity. Have a latte, drop the kids at Sunday school, and be amazed. That's clericalism.
It sounds like my
Fifth
Sunday.
shiny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We took the fifth one from the pandemic. You heard of herd immunity. We call it herd community. And we were looking at Pope Gregory in the 6th century on this one. And it says basically, if you slosh around in a small group of 12 or in a worship service of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, you're a disciple. Not true. So lastly, we have, and this is so important for entrepreneurs, this is called not the main thing. And we took that one to borrow from Cyprian in the 5th century. And it basically says if you chase the wrong stuff, in other words, if you set the mission aside and start running everything on the tyranny of the urgent rather than the mission you're called to, you will be in the ditch sooner or later. So those are 6 shiny objects. How are we doing?
No, it's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can relate to a lot of that. I see a lot of that. We talk about, just that last one, just trading the most important for the urgent, the mission for the urgent, what's in front of you. So this is throwing us off of discipleship. We're doing a lot, right? I think we're doing church probably more and bigger than we ever have been, right? We're doing church where people are going to church and we can see church with a click of a button. So we're doing it, but we're missing it. And I think that was obviously your very first chapter. We're missing that true discipleship. So can you just dive into that? Obviously you talk in your book about there's no short-term fix. We're all looking for this. Oh, what's the problem? How can we short-term fix it? How can we swiftly fix it? And you say that this is a long-term solution. So I want to just kind of flip it over. And I think we would all agree there's something off. There's something going on. Now, let's go into that. Let's go into that long-term solution. What are some of the things?
I'm going to talk about the idea of churchianity, and here's how I'm going to lead off with it. It's like looking at your kids at the age of 12 and saying, where is the switch that I flip just so I can get them to 37 and I don't have to worry about all this stuff anymore? The answer is, it doesn't exist. You're going to walk every day, every hour, every year. That's the way you're going to go with your kids. If you want your children to develop into the people you want them to be, it's you with them as they develop. There's no microwave answer. It's also true when we think about discipleship in this churchianity context, Brett, that if I told you Super Bowl's coming up, as we're recording this broadcast, we're not too far off from the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So if I said you're supposed to be an NFL player, and here's how we're going to make you an NFL player. We're going to let you watch a lot of videos. We're going to let you go sit in the huddle. We're going to let you sit on the bench. Once a year, we'll send you out on the field. You get to run 5 yards down the field and line up, and then we'll call timeout and we'll pull you back off the field and let the pros keep doing what the pros do. Now you're an NFL football player. We'd all laugh about that.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot. We've been right there when stuff's been happening, but we aren't actually living the life of a disciple. So let me place a model on the table to talk about if we have to really short circuit the conversation, the disciple dilemma, and heaven forbid anybody should get stuck with this as the only answer. But I think this will help us. The major missing components of discipleship biblically in churchianity are, first of all, the individual does not recognize that they are in an identity change, a transformation, a metamorpho, as the New Testament describes it. This is not becoming a member or doing stuff. This is a fundamental change in our identity. And we see Christ describing it as you're going to be denying self, taking up a cross, counting the cost, and you're going to get abused for it. It's just going to get tougher as you start living this life out. But you are becoming what we call a doulos. That's a Greek word for bondservant. And for those of us in the business world, it means you're bankrupt. You are absolutely bankrupt, incapable of paying back the incredible indebtedness Christ has taken on for each one of us. And we are largely missing in Christianity, in churchianity, the identity of the disciple. And I can give some statistics about that kind of boggle the mind if we want to explore that. But if I just told you 2 of them, it would help make the case. 90% of the people in the pews today do not have any track record sharing who Christ is in their own life with anyone. 80% of the people in the pews have no prayer life, no Bible study, no fellowship. They attend church 1.7 times a month. That's 80% of the people in the pews. Then there's a whole bunch of empty seats in those pews, and that's because 65% of people from the age of 54 down who grew up in the church are no longer there. They walked out. So if you pile all that together, we look at this idea of a fundamental identity change never took place, because if that identity change has taken place, as Christ said, that new creature is going to want to be where the action is. That's one piece of the puzzle. That's one side of the coin. Now let me take it to the other side of the coin. And this is my plea to those of you who are leaders. If you're a leader in a church, that individual can only begin that transformation if you put enough oxygen in the room, water in the soil for that individual to flourish, to be able to flourish. And that's a leadership problem. It wasn't your fault the disciple dilemma came to be, but it's your responsibility now to start changing the culture to say, it begins with me, one-on-one with another, walking alongside that person and expecting, however you use the word expecting in your particular church, expecting everybody else in the church also team up, go out, and start talking about the reason for the hope they have within them. So we have the individual and we have the culture. Leaders have to change the culture, but you as an individual, if you think churchianity is Christianity, you're probably actually not a disciple. You're probably a member. There's a long explanation, but there you go.
Wow. Yeah, I was kind of baffled by reading your book and reading about the statistics. 90% don't have an interest. I think that was a thing that kind of baffled me. They don't have an interest in sharing their faith. They don't think it's important. And
9 out of 10. I mean, you just got to go, wow, what's with that?
Yeah.
And that's not one statistic. That's Barna, that's Pew, that's IPPR, that's the Humanist Society. They're studying us and they're going, yeah, 9 out of 10 of you guys don't buy this.
Yeah, definitely. So you're talking about just identity. I mean, obviously that's what we, I wrote this book about identity. Our organization's about identity and your identity in Christ and what's the mission and purpose behind that. I want to maybe ask you about your own personal life. Dennis, did you have someone that discipled you? Did you have someone that had an interest? Because obviously you're very, very passionate about this. Was this just something that you saw this problem, or was there somewhere along your own journey or experience? What did that look like? What did that disciple do? And if not, tell us about someone else that you've done this with.
The fantastic news in my life is, yes, I've had some wonderful people who came up to me and said, you're coming with me. And they took me out into life. Now, this is very biblical as we watch people making disciples. Somebody walks up and says, Brett walks up to Dennis and says, Dennis, you're coming with me. And I'm going to show you how to live on the street as a follower of Christ in the vocational world that you and I sync up in. So part of in my early years, right out of college, I was involved in this ministry as our ministry was I was flying fighter jets in the Air Force. And so we said that our ministry is to introduce Russian fighter pilots to Jesus. Now, that's kind of a joke in a way, right? And so I hope nobody just got really mad at me for saying that. But the point was, in that world, I had someone like I had in high school, like I had in college, and like I had shortly after I was out of college, but I had someone in the Air Force walk up to me, a Jedi Knight in my jet, the F-15, and he said, you're coming with me, and we're going to go walk, live, and fly for Christ. Then after that, more men in my life coming aboard, not groups of men, although I do have groups of men, but I have individuals. So my shout outs are to people like Dr. Calvin Miller, who was a pastor, a poet, a physicist, and a painter. Fantastic early experience in Christ. Sly Ken Fox, one of the great fighter pilots in the F-15, who said, you're coming with me. Dr. Glody St. Fard. I mean, but you have got to have these people in your life. And if nobody is walking up to you and saying, come with me, go find them. And if they start blubbering about, well, I've never done this before, say, I don't care. We're going to go do life together in Christ. That's so important. And that was my story. That's the start.
No, I love that. I had someone do the same thing for me in college, that he put his his life on hold certain times and discipled me, was just a huge impact. And then years later, I had gotten baptized, and he was the first one that I call. And it's just so funny that you just don't see it happen. I mean, I look at my own life, I look at other people's lives. People don't just reach out and build that relationship, build that brotherhood.
Here's a killer statistic for you too. 95% of pastors have never been discipled.
Wow. Well, let's talk about pastors, for example. You talk about in your book, and I can definitely see this too, is just there's a high burnout rate amongst pastors. And you relate this, let me relate to the business world, that I build a team because I know that I can't do everything. I used to do everything, and it's a lot of work. And so let's talk about just this burnout rate of pastors. I mean, I couldn't imagine, like, our pastor, just even to come up and to study and to do a sermon every single week. That's one sermon. Some of these pastors are doing 3, 4, 5. I couldn't imagine the marathon every week of that. But talk about pastors. I mean, you're in this world. Talk about the burnout rate, pastors leaving, doing something else. What does it look like for their life? We're putting so much on them, so much pressure. If they make one mistake, we're all looking at them. Talk to us about the whole pastor world right now.
Why is it that for every seminary graduate that comes out saying, I want to be a pastor, we have 2 pastors below retirement age walking off saying, I'm not doing this anymore? And the answer is they have to put up with people like me, Dennis, and like Brett, and like all you guys listening to this thing. We're hard to get along with, right? Mm-hmm. For so many different reasons. Now, pastors are called to be those shepherds of a flock. But one of the things that I notice is we've talked to seminary presidents and walked and talked in front of a lot of these professors in the seminaries, is that we're teaching pastors how to be intellectually, theologically, counseling wise, sharp, wise, and wonderful. But what we're not doing is we're not preparing them to have to actually live with folks like us. And we're teaching them in a lot of the seminaries today, stay away from those people personally. Preach to them, but as soon as the sermon's over, head for your office, lock the door, right? Number 2, it is a tremendously toxic world for pastors as they get every week notes from people trying to help them improve the way they think, act, and behave, condemning them for what they've done, not being willing to help support and cheer for them. I'm just running through in my head right now as we're talking. We've interviewed 29 pastors on the disciple dilemma, and of 29, 24 of them want out and are in despair. That's wow. A lot of pastors. Now, that could say for 1 or 2, life's a little hard in my church.
Yeah.
But something statistically significant about that, so if you were the CEO of an organization and every day members of the board walked in and they said, you're a lousy CEO, I don't like the way you're doing things, we're going to come for you, we're going to get you, and by the way, we think your family's all dorked up, that wouldn't go over very well.
Yeah.
That's the life of a pastor.
Yeah. I mean, I just see it. It's funny. Sometimes me and my wife will go to a movie and we'll watch the previews of the movie or before the movie, and we'll be this critic about these particular previews. You'll be like, that does not look good. I think we do the same thing with pastors. Like, that sermon didn't do it for me, or we just don't like certain things that they're doing, and they're in this rat race. They have to put up with us in the congregation. I couldn't imagine just the negativity that kind of comes with that. Dennis,
here's one other piece of the puzzle that really drowns this out too. We were talking a few minutes ago about clericalism. The message goes like this: you as a pastor, everything is dependent on you. If you aren't at all the meetings, if you aren't leading all the charges, and by the way, if you aren't making the disciples, they ain't no disciples. Disciples only come from pastors. Now, that's a lie, but we're transmitting that you've got to do the sermon, you've got to make everybody happy, you've got to make the disciples, you've got to go on the mission trips. That's a tough life.
It is. Yeah. No, it is. Would you say that, this whole discipleship, and you say it's based on some of the leadership, is it just, how do we raise up these leaders? So like, and I know, we come to Christ, born again, we're in the Word, but is there some way that you're seeing that, hey, to raise up the congregation, to raise up leaders, to raise up the pastors, not to have everything dependent on them? Like me, as a business owner, that's one of my jobs. One of our complete missions is to raise up leaders on our team. So I'm not the bottleneck, is what I call it. Like, I don't want to have to be the bottleneck of the organization, because if I get hit by a bus, the organization is completely dead. So
that's the crucial piece of the puzzle for us. If you want to do something about discipleship, the first thing that I want to encourage you to do is look at your mission. If your mission statement is talking about values and visions and how we're going to be really nice people and we're going to win the whole world for Christ, I'm going to provocatively suggest you got the wrong mission statement. Because that's not the mission that Christ gave us. So first of all, do you actually believe that? If you don't, then peace be with you and you've made your decision. But in the area of discipleship, if you really as a pastor want to unload the pain of having to be the dude or the dudes that do everything, you've got to make disciples, not delegates, not staff members. You've got to make disciples. And it starts you first, even if you've never been discipled, bring one alongside you and make the rest of the church realize this is the coolest thing, because this is what Christ called us to do. And if you do that, if you start that long, slow walk with one or two in discipleship, and their job then is to go get one or two in discipleship, your life over the course of a year or more is going to start unloading, because disciples are going to start springing up who are making disciples, and they're going to start dragging the tasks away from you. You won't have to carry them. They're going to take them away from you, and off you're going to go. That would be CEO advice to pastors.
No, I love it. I love it, because people want to lead. They want to own something, right? They want to be captains. And I think it's just, we just don't give them that opportunity.
I love what you said about that as a leader. I love that you're handing that back to your people and saying, I'm not the bottleneck. You guys carry these balls.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm a big, I don't watch like a lot of sports, but I grew up playing basketball and sports, and I just related to, you got maybe the owner on the professional sports teams, you got him, and then you got the coach, but then you got the captains on a team. And I just always say, this is your team. You go, what plays do you want to run? Anyways, Dennis, as we wrap up this podcast, I just want to wrap it up with this. And so obviously this is a podcast for a lot of business guys, business owners. We talked about that. And I think one of the reasons why you wrote this book, not only for just pastors and leaders within a church, but also for business owners trying to make a work some sort of a place of discipleship. So can you talk about that? I know you've been helping CEOs, businesses. You've been in a lot of churches as well. But as far as business owners and entrepreneurs that are leading people that have a team, can you talk to them right now about workplace discipleship?
Absolutely. Wonderful question, too. The most important thing that I've learned in my career in the business world is my job is not to sell Jesus to anybody in my office, but my job is to be what 1 Peter 3:15 tells us to be. And here's the statement. And if you already know this, great, you got to memorize. But let me just rattle this off for you. In your heart, set apart Christ as Lord. So there's your mission. You got your priority set. Always be prepared to give to anyone who asks you the reason for the hope that's within you. The word hope is certainty, the reason, pointing to Christ. The point is, I don't have to go around preaching. I don't necessarily have to go around handing out Bibles, but I have to live weird. I have to be that whack job CEO who just doesn't live in despair, anguish, overload. Of course, I'm a sinner. Of course, I'm going to screw some of this up. But in the workplace, what I notice is more people come walking into the office going like, you should be totally freaked out right now, or you should be totally amped up about this right now. Why? What's going on? And you can look at them and say, because my hope is not in the corporation. My hope is in this reason. Here's who I'm for. You want to talk about that? Some yes, some no. That's not necessarily saying we all have to be evangelists, but it is saying every one of us in Christ is a disciple. Every one of us is to be prepared with the reason for the hope as a CEO or as a sluggo in whatever I'm doing.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Dennis, thank you so much for being on the Iron Deep podcast. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. Wish this book sells, so many copies. I think it's just such a great topic. I want to just give you the opportunity because I know you are a businessman. You wrote this book. You do some talks to help out. So how can someone maybe learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And by the way, thanks for the ministry that you got at Iron Deep. What a beautiful crowd. What a beautiful set of topics you guys are running on. Go for it, man. TheDiscipleDilemma.com. That's where you can find the website, The Disciple, not discipleship, but TheDiscipleDilemma.com. You can also see it on YouTube, The Disciple Dilemma, Instagram, The Disciple Dilemma, LinkedIn, The Disciple Dilemma, Facebook. You get it. We're out there. And we're trying to have these conversations. We're trying to say what's going on in churchianity and what would be supposed to be about as disciples in Christianity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're going to put that in our show notes, on our YouTube channel, on our website. Thank you so much, Dennis, for being on the Iron D podcast today. God bless you, buddy.
You too, Brett. Run the race well.